What if I told you that one of the most famous military victories in history wasn't decided by an army, but by a teenager with a sling and a single stone? Today, we're diving into one of the most iconic confrontations ever recorded, the story of David and Goliath. But this isn't just a Sunday school story. It's a narrative rooted in real geography, real warfare, real political tensions, and the brutal realities of Iron Age combat. This is the story of how a pebble won a war. To understand this battle, we need to travel back to around the 10th century BCE. The setting? The rugged hills and valleys of ancient Canaan. Two rival powers stood on a collision course. On one side was the rising kingdom of Israel, a confederation of tribes trying to unify under a monarchy. On the other were the Philistines, a technologically advanced, warlike people who had settled along the coastal plains. The Philistines held a critical advantage: iron. While much of Israel still relied on bronze tools and weapons, the Philistines had mastered ironworking. Archaeological discoveries in sites like Ashkelon and Ekron show evidence of advanced metallurgy. Iron weapons meant stronger swords, better spearheads, and more durable armor. In military terms, that's the equivalent of bringing steel to a bronze fight. Tensions had been escalating for years. Raids, border skirmishes, political instability, and then came the standoff in the Valley of Elah, the battlefield. The confrontation took place in the Valley of Elah, a real geographical location southwest of Jerusalem. Even today, you can stand there and see how perfectly it fits the biblical description. Two ridges rise on either side of the valley, with a dry stream bed cutting through the center. According to the book of Samuel, the Philistines occupied one hill, the Israelites another. Between them lay open ground, a deadly killing field. In ancient warfare, this kind of terrain mattered. Armies didn't just charge blindly, they calculated positioning, elevation, supply lines. A downhill charge could mean the difference between victory and slaughter. Neither side wanted to give up the high ground, so instead of a full-scale battle, the Philistines proposed something strategic and psychological.
Hail, Israelites! I challenge your mightiest to single combat! Let him come forth and decide our fates!
Single combat. Enter the giant. Out from the Philistine ranks stepped Goliath. The text describes him as 6 cubits and a span tall, roughly 9 feet 9 inches. Goliath wasn't just tall, he was a walking tank. He wore a bronze helmet, a coat of scale armor weighing about 5,000 shekels, roughly 125 pounds. Bronze greaves protected his legs. A massive spear with an iron tip described as weighing 600 shekels, about 15 pounds. To put that into perspective, that spearhead alone weighed as much as a modern sledgehammer. And he didn't stand alone. He had a shield bearer in front of him, common for heavily armed infantry. And every day for 40 days, he stepped forward and issued the same challenge. Send a man to fight me. Winner takes all. Psychological warfare at its finest. Leading Israel at this time was King Saul. Saul himself was described as head and shoulders taller than other Israelites. If anyone should have answered the challenge, it was him. But he didn't. Why? Because ancient warfare wasn't romantic. It was brutal. A duel like this wasn't symbolic. It was lethal. One slip, one miscalculation, and you were dead. Not wounded, dead. And if their champion fell, the entire army would lose morale instantly. For 40 days, Goliath taunted them, and no one stepped forward. Enter David. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even old enough to be in the army. He was the youngest son in his family, a shepherd from Bethlehem. He arrived at the battlefield not to fight, but to deliver food to his brothers. And when he heard Goliath's taunts, something shifted. To David, this wasn't just a military insult. It was a spiritual one. Goliath wasn't merely challenging Israel. He was mocking their God. Now here's where history gets interesting. David wasn't just proposing a miracle. He was proposing a tactical advantage. Some people imagine David's sling as a child's toy. It wasn't. The ancient sling was a serious military weapon. Archaeological excavations throughout the Levant have uncovered sling stones, smooth, rounded projectiles designed for aerodynamic accuracy. A skilled slinger could hurl a stone at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Greek historians later documented specialized slinger units, such as those from the Balearic Islands, who were so deadly they could strike targets at over 200 meters with lethal force. This wasn't random luck. This was long-range, precision weaponry. David, as a shepherd, would have used a sling daily to protect sheep from predators. He tells Saul exactly that. From a tactical standpoint, David understood something Saul didn't. Goliath was built for close combat. Heavy armor, massive spear, but all of that was useless if your opponent never got close. Before the duel, Saul tried to equip David with royal armor. David couldn't even walk properly in it. David rejected it. Instead, he chose mobility. 5 smooth stones from the stream, a sling, and a staff. Speed versus strength. Range versus reach. Picture the scene. Goliath sees David approaching, not in armor, not with a sword, but with a staff. To Goliath, this is an insult. Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? He expects close combat. Instead, David runs toward the battle line, not away. As he moves, begins rotating it, building centrifugal force, and then releases. The stone flies. Given the velocity and density of ancient sling stones, modern ballistic testing suggests it could easily fracture a human skull, even through light armor. The text says the stone struck Goliath in the forehead. He falls face down. One shot. David then takes Goliath's own sword and finishes the job. The Philistines, seeing their champion fallen, panic, and they flee. The Israelites pursue. A single duel breaks the psychological stalemate. The story didn't just end a duel, it shifted the political future of Israel. David's victory made him a national hero. Songs were sung. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. That popularity would eventually threaten Saul's throne. Years later, David would become king himself, and under his rule, Israel would expand territorially and consolidate power in the region. This wasn't just a personal triumph. It was the beginning of a dynasty. The phrase David versus Goliath has become universal shorthand for underdog victory. Small business versus corporation. But stripped of metaphor, the original story remains grounded in a simple truth. Technology matters. Terrain matters. Psychology matters. And some may say, a touch of divine providence can sometimes matter most of all. And in some cases, the smallest projectile can change the course of history.